3HL 104.5 The Zone. Brent Doherty, Don Davenport with you. Ron Slay out with the wisdom teeth. We told him he wouldn't be here.
He didn't listen.
I mean, he even said he called us, like a video conference call with all of us after he got out, and he laughingly said he would be here. But he is not. But Pete Prisco is from CBSSports.com, senior NFL columnist. Pete, what's up? How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
We are doing well. We're going to talk about Will Levis and the Titans because you were in Nashville for training camp, so we certainly want to get your perspective there. But what about Jerry Jones, man? we found out that he has had things in his life that he couldn't afford. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I can believe it. I mean, yeah. Look, Jerry's all Jerry wants to do right now the rest of his life is try and win one Super Bowl or at least get to one because it's been a long, long time for the Cowboys.
Do you think Dak's the guy that gets him there?
Well, I mean, if everything around was pretty good. Dak led the league in touchdown passes last year. People forget that.
Yep.
I mean, he's just got to, like a lot of these guys, including Tua, who got a big contract today, he's got to learn how to win the big games in the playoffs. And that's the next step for all the quarterbacks.
I think some of these teams get trapped with these guys that have their contracts up, like the Tua situation perhaps. And I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there, but I could see a scenario where they think, man, this guy can't get us a Super Bowl, but we got to pay him. And maybe he can. I don't know.
It's damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Exactly right.
What it is.
That's exactly right.
Because if you don't sign him to the contract extension, what do? You go back in. The draft next year isn't great, loaded with quarterbacks. So you go get a stopgap guy. So you almost have to give him the long-term contract. And the reality is these are only 3-year deals anyways. They'll tear them up in 3 years and see what goes forward from there. But, yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic with all these quarterbacks getting paid. Jordan Love's about to get his, too.
At Prisco CBS on X, Pete Prisco with us, senior NFL columnist for CBSSports.com. So, Babs?
No, I was going to say, we were talking about all these. You're in a position where, okay, you kind of have to give your quarterback the big contract, even if he can't win in the postseason. I feel like the Titans are in a great position from the standpoint of they're going to get to see if Will Levis is the guy this year. And you spent some time with him. They've made moves around him to give him some tools to succeed. But I feel like, Pete, the national perspective on Will Levis is awful. I mean, there's not a whole lot of national guys like yourself who believe that Will Levis is going to get it done this year, but you're kind of different.
Yeah, and they've been wrong before. And I always, I liken this to Josh Allen. When Josh Allen came out, I loved Josh Allen. He was my number one quarterback. I thought he was going to be a big-time player. His stats weren't great at Wyoming. Mm-hmm. His completion percentage wasn't great at Wyoming, but there were reasons for it. I always joke around and say he was throwing to bouncers and bartenders. The balls would, doink off their face masks. And the reality is he had all the tools. Even in his first couple of years, people still picked him apart. Same with Levis. Levis, if you put Levis's junior tape on, he was phenomenal. And you watched him against Georgia in that season, he was outstanding. Then they have a change at offensive coordinator. They brought a guy in that wasn't very good. They also, he was banged up. The offensive line wasn't very good. Didn't have any skilled people, and he struggled. And yet he stayed on the field. And then he starts getting picked apart. Quirky, weird. And he did a lot of that stuff, like he said to me. He did a lot of that for social media to try and, make a few bucks here and there. But the reality is he's not anything like the perception of him that's out there. And that's unfair to the kid. It's not just I'm talking about a football standpoint, but I'm talking about a personality standpoint as well.
Yeah, you and I were talking about your contrarian view to a lot of the national guys, and you said that this isn't the first time, and you actually compared Josh Allen to him, which I thought was interesting. But what? So I think national guy that doesn't put eyeballs on the Titans, which why would you, right? Like last year,
understand that. Yeah.
Last year. You look at, I think people get trapped into looking at 54.8% completion percentage and don't dive in further. And that's why I was glad to see you down here, and you put eyeballs on him, you talk to him, you talk to people around him. What did you learn about Will Levis as a person and kind of being able to project what he might be?
Well, as a person, he believes in himself 100%, and that's all you ever wanted as a quarterback. I mean, I've been around this league a long time. I've talked to guys that, they're a little mealy-mouthed about it. Not him. He thinks he's going to be great, and that's what you want from that position. He also, the other side of that is he works at it. I mean, you saw the lead to that story when he's in Italy. He's doing work. He scouts out 2 practice fields to go get work in during a vacation, and actually gets locked inside one of them. He hopped the fence. He couldn't get out. They called the cops on him, and he got out of the situation. But that's a dedicated guy. That's what you want. It's like when Peyton Manning used to travel on vacation, he did the same thing. And Brian Callahan worked with Peyton Manning. He worked with Matt Stafford. He worked with Joe Burrow. He knows what it takes for quarterbacks, and he loves Will Levis.
Pete Prisco with us from CBSSports.com. One of the things that's been kind of a hot topic around here is that he's been working on his footwork. And I know you dove into that in your piece. And in terms of like arm strength and where the ball is going, you and I were standing next to Coach Mack, and he feathered the ball into NWI on the sideline. And Coach Mack said last year he would have thrown a piss missile there. That's what Coach Mack calls them. And I said, well, does that show you growth? And he said, yes. So what did you find out about him working on like his lower body to help him with his throws?
Well, because he has the big arm, and there's no doubt about it. You saw it last year. But like Callahan told me, he said, look, that arm can be that much better if he just works on his lower body and shortens it up. And that's what he's done. And you could see that. You mentioned that play, and I actually asked him about that play. And he said, yeah, last year he would not have made that play. He would not have feathered that ball in there. It would have been a different throw. And then there was a throw yesterday, and I don't know if you remember this, but he had a guy in the middle of the field where it was a long pass, and he missed him. Mm-hmm. And after the play, you saw him look at Callahan, and they kind of, I don't think the receiver ran quite what he was supposed to run, but he didn't throw the receiver under the bus.
Yeah.
He threw himself under the bus. And that's what you want out of the quarterback. He's not going to blame anybody else. In fact, they weren't supposed to be throwing the ball down the field at all in the first couple of days because they don't want the receivers running that way because of, obviously, you kind of getting acclimated back to it. But on that play, that was the read. So he made the right read. Didn't make a great throw because the route wasn't great. But again, that's who he is. He's going to let it go now and then. He's a gunslinger.
How do you think this division plays itself out? Texans 1, and then where do you go 2, 3, 4?
Well, I think it's going to be a tough division all the way around. I think all the young quarterbacks are good. I mean, that's a year ago you would have looked at this division and said it was bad. And, Jacksonville's good. The rest of them all have young quarterbacks. Well, Jacksonville didn't know how to handle being really good. They went into that Sunday night game against the Ravens as the number 1 seed in the AFC and collapsed, in large part because their quarterback got hurt. But I think, the one thing and you talk to people around the league, the same thing with the Texans. They have to learn how to win now. You won, now you're targeted. Now you're expected to be good. That's a big step for a young team. So we'll see how they handle that. But I'd say they're the one. Then number 2 is probably Jacksonville. Number 3 is probably Tennessee. And then number 4, I think, is the Colts. That's the way I would look at it right now. But if Levis can go to where I think he can go, if the right side of the offensive line can hold up, and the pass rush, which, the Arden Key and those guys have to be able to get pressure on the outside, then I think they have a chance to push for a wild card spot.
So do you think, what's the ceiling for him? Like top 10 quarterback in the league or higher?
Absolutely. In my book, he is. By the way, I had him as the number 1 quarterback in the draft 2 years ago. I say this all the time. I don't know how the Carolina Panthers could look at that and say, okay, we're going to draft a 5'9", 185-pound quarterback rather than the big strong-arm guy who can whip the ball around and make all the plays. I never get it. Look, C.J. Stroud is special.
Yeah.
At least he looked that way as a rookie. Nobody saw that coming, including the Texans. They didn't see it coming either.
Pete Prisco, hey, man, good to see you, good to meet you, and appreciate the time. Good stuff. And we tweeted out a link to the story, CBSSports.com. Pete Prisco with some background to Will Levis, and the stuff in Italy was fascinating, and he had not told that story yet. So that was a good read. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right, there he is, Pete Prisco, legend in this business, at Prisco CBS. When we come back, you can react to that. Definitely take a look at that, reading that piece as well, because, again, national guy looks at 54.8% and thinks Will Levis is garbage.
And I love that he came and spent 2 days here.
Yep. 615-737-1045.